Welcome to the Wellbeing Uprising. I'm your host, Bethany Ainsley. In this episode, I'm joined by Steph Edusei, Chief Executive of St. Oswald's Hospice.
Being compassionate and having a compassionate approach to things is core to driving the business forward.
I'm also joined by Jen Hallam, Managing Director of Gardiner Richardson.
Having to accommodate people who've got different needs to you, different experiences, different backgrounds, really helps you to understand a different perspective.
Life doesn't stop when you come to work, yet many employees still feel pressure to hide personal struggles or return to normal too soon. This conversation looks at how leaders and teams can create space for honesty, flexibility, and support when life inevitably interrupts work.
If you have that kind of compassionate, empathetic approach, like sort of baked in from the start to everything that you do, it doesn't become a choice of like, oh, well, do we do the nice thing or the thing that's going to make money? Because if you look after your people and your people are happy, they'll stay with you, they'll do really good work, they'll communicate well with our clients. It's a good way to run your business.
So Steph, you lead an organisation where care and compassion is at the heart of that organisation. How do you think that's shaped your view on how workplaces should respond to things like grief or illness or caring responsibilities?
I think that being at St. Oswald's Hospice has really kind of crystallised and proven what I felt was the right thing. The hospice is the most caring, the most compassionate place I have ever worked. And you are as likely to have a conversation about how somebody's feeling, about their outside of work life, and just how they're coping, as you are about kind of the nuts and bolts of the day job. It's just built into what we do. So having that real lens has been really valuable for me in understanding that people are people and they're not different people at work. They just highlight a different element of who they are. So if they've got something going on at home, that comes to work with them, and they may not talk about it, they may not show it, but it will affect how they show up at work. So really having that, even to the extent of, are you okay? Is everything okay? And it being okay to ask that question, being in that kind of environment where that's not an intrusion. You're not going to sit and pick somebody's life apart and say, you have to tell me, is really important. And that's the kind of culture that we've got. It's the, if it's important to you, it's important to me. And therefore, if you want to share it with me and I can help and support you with that, then that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think are some of the common mistakes that organisations make when trying to deal with a sensitive situation like that?
Policies. So policies are really important. Don't get me wrong. You have to, if you've got a policy, well, first of all, you need to have a policy and you need to follow the policy because that's about equity and fairness. But what people do is they are so doggedly following the policy that, again, they forget they're dealing with human beings. So you see sometimes it's how the policy is applied. It's that practical application of it without considering any type of humanity in that. It's so for example, things like sickness absence. When somebody is unwell and they've maybe got a long-term condition or a potentially a life-limiting condition, you can't treat them in the same way as somebody who's just off every Friday because they happen to go out on a Thursday night. There's a very different type of way in which you deal with things. But some people don't sit and take time to understand that person and work out, well, what's going on and how can I help you? And actually, sometimes, why are you out every Thursday night drinking? Is there something else going on there that we can? So that kind of really rigid and fixed application of policies and almost using the policy like a defence is probably the biggest mistake I see.
Do you think there could also be a fear of saying or doing the wrong thing?
Absolutely. And particularly when it comes to things like bereavement, people don't know what to say at all. And you see people who actually can be really caring and compassionate people who will either freeze or they think, if I talk about that person who's died, it's going to upset my colleagues, so I just won't talk about them. It's one of the things we hear the most is that people who've had a relative or loved one that's died, it's almost like that person suddenly disappears because nobody wants to talk about them anymore. Or saying things like they're in a better place now, or at least they're at peace and things like that. Actually, that's not, we shouldn't be imposing any of that on people. If they want to say that, that's fine. But we shouldn't say that, because actually can make people very annoyed. So just being there for people and saying, I'm so sorry. And things like, however you feel, it's okay. We're actually dealing with a bereavement in our family at the moment. And I keep saying to my other half, who it's his uncle that's died, it's okay. Whatever you feel, it's okay. And that's natural and it's normal. And I'm here for you.
It's not necessarily about finding the right words. It's about being able to have that empathy, isn't it?
It's having that connection, having that safety around people, that they know that actually they can be really angry, they can be really happy, because sometimes, particularly with big life events, you then feel guilty because you're happy about something else that's happened. It's okay to do that. And letting people know that you're a safe person to do that. And I think a lot of that is by having that empathy.
Yeah. Do you think that's something that can be taught?
Yes. Yeah. I think some people are naturally very empathetic, but you can learn how to, certainly how to demonstrate empathy. Empathy is something I think that you can learn through life experience and really taking time to understand. So what does that mean? How did that impact me differently to my neighbour? And why might it have impacted my neighbour differently? So sometimes some people almost have to do like a bit of academic research to understand the differences in the different ways that people react to things. But yeah, absolutely. It's something that I think we constantly and continually grow and develop as we mature. For those of us that do mature, because not everybody does, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in nursing, for example, you need to have a lot of empathy, don't you? And it's interesting how that can relate into other sectors as well, because like you said, empathy is needed when you're working with people, regardless of what situation. Jen, I'm really interested to hear from your perspective as a managing director of a value-driven agency. How do you approach supporting your team through personal challenges?
I think it's really important that you have that culture where we have the sort of depths of relationships with each other. We're quite lucky in that way, in that we're a smaller team. So we do know each other really well. We kind of have little insights into each other's lives outside of work. And I think that just means that when somebody's not quite themselves, not quite right, it's like we can spot it quicker, and it just lets you have that intervention with them. I think in terms of the practical support, I think the most important thing that we try to do is to listen and to let people know that they've got like a safe space to talk at whatever level they want to. I think sometimes people like to keep a little bit of boundaries between their home and work life, and all they actually want from you is quite practical support. So kind of have some time off to go to an appointment, or can somebody help me with this project that I'm working on? And that's fine. Or they might want to open up a little bit more. I think it's being able to like read the situation and meet people where they are to help them best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And you've done quite a lot of work with the Percy Hadley Foundation as well. How's that shaped your perspective on empathy and supporting people?
Well, I think that's a big part of our social values. So we work with Percy Hadley Foundation and New Writing North. And the objective behind that is to make our business more inclusive in terms of as an employer, but also because we're a brand communications agency. So we need to be able to understand different perspectives, different audiences, to make what we do kind of more effective. And I think having work experience placements with Percy Hadley and New Writing North has touched almost everybody in our business in some way, shape or form. And I think having to accommodate people who've got different needs to you, different experiences, different backgrounds, really helps you to understand a different perspective and to challenge your thinking or your biases. And I think that naturally just makes you a little bit more empathetic and a little bit more considered.
So what practices have you put in place that have been particularly helpful in terms of making people feel supported?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't have a big HR team or anything like that. So we do have policies, but as Steph said, obviously the policy is just a piece of paper unless you kind of put it into practice in a kind of empathetic way. I think the most effective thing that we've done is to try to create a culture where people know that they're respected and trusted, so that there's no fear or worry about asking for whatever it is people need just to facilitate their life outside of work. So going to an appointment, picking up kids, caring for somebody, whatever it is. And I think if you have that foundation, then when somebody is going through something really tough, they know that they're going to be safe to ask for whatever help and support that they need, and they're not going to be sort of penalised for it.
Do you think the pandemic's changed the way that leaders think about compassion and well-being in the workplace?
Yeah, I think so. I think the working from home exclusively gave us all quite a lot of insight into each other's home lives. So the kids kind of in the background of your Zoom calls and all the rest of it. And just, you know, it's obviously a tough kind of emotional time for people. And I think in some ways that's made people a little bit more empathetic, which I think is really positive. I think one of the challenges that we found is it's easy to just defer then to quite transactional relationships, because you can get quite used to only speaking on a scheduled call or sending messages to people on WhatsApp or what have you. And I think we've tried to make a real conscious effort to build in time to have proper conversations with each other, in whatever form that takes, but regular kind of one-to-ones, and just checking in the kitchen when we're making cups of tea, and just making sure that we've got those like depths of relationships with each other.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting actually, because I was thinking about the pandemic as you were talking, and so one of the things that I think I had a slight advantage because I was coaching people online before we went into lockdown. So I was used to having to build a relationship and a proper kind of non-transactional relationship with people online. So then when we went into the environment where everybody was online, it was very different for me. And one of the things that I think that perhaps we've lost a little bit since then is that some people have almost forgotten that, you know, people do have lives. And I used to make a point of, you used to see it quite often when kids were at home, and you could see that people were distracted because their kids needed them. And I would make a point of saying, you know, just stop, have a chat with them, bring them on the camera if they want to come on the camera. And we had people showing pictures of the kids' drawings and all sorts of things, because that's a part of their life, or their dog, normally their dog or their cat, to be honest. That maintaining that in kind of hybrid or remote relationships, I think is really, really important. And being able to take time to, even if it is in a structured formal meeting, of having some time at the beginning and at the end, like you would do in a face-to-face meeting, where you just chat. And I quite frequently will get 10 minutes into a meeting and say, right, should we actually do some work now? Because you've got to still do that. You can't be all business and, okay, let's do 5 minutes, quick chat, and then go again. It's a very different, you've got to think about it more, I think, when you're not bumping into each other over a cuppa and things. So
That's really helpful. I think, so previous podcast that we did, we had Herb came on and he was talking about methods of communication, and he said how he hates Slack in particular. And I think it just highlights again how important it is to choose the right method of communication, because again, it's about building that relationship and building trust. And if it's Slack or it's WhatsApp, you are missing the detail around who is this person, what's going on in their lives, and things like that.
I've loved seeing things like GIFs and things coming through on Teams now, because people are getting a bit more relaxed about it. And you do see people's personality and how they choose to respond to messages and things. And some have actually like almost made me spit my tea out because they've been really funny. But you get a contact with people who actually I wouldn't necessarily see in my normal working day. So yeah, I think you can't over rely on those things, and those conversations and those contacts are really important. But allowing people to be a little bit more relaxed about some of the methods, I think, is important as well.
Definitely. And I think because of the nature of what we do, I think having that skill set of being able to build kind of real empathetic relationships is so important in terms of like our client services, because we work with clients sometimes based in a different city, different country, and we don't get to see them face to face very often. So we've got to be able to communicate through digital platforms in a way that is empathetic and human, like say just leaving some space in meetings to chat about what's going on.
So Steph, you're also the host of the podcast Black All Year, which aims to amplify voices and create inclusive dialogue. How do you think inclusivity ties into empathy?
If you feel and are included, you're more likely to share. And I think making people feel included is a core result of empathy. So I don't know what it's like to have a disability, but actually, if I'm empathetic, I can understand that. I can appreciate that, and I won't know everything, and I won't know about all of the implications of that, but actually I will be able to go, hang on a second, what must this be like for you? I might even just ask the question of, how does this impact you? Whereas if I don't have that empathy, I won't even think of doing that. And I think that's one of the big things that we see around race and ethnicity, is that because so many people have never encountered racism, they've never encountered some of the barriers, they just don't know they exist. And that's one of the bits of feedback I've had on the podcast from white people who've listened to it, is it's taught them so much about just some of the things that we encounter that they're absolutely gobsmacked when they hear about some of the things that people will do or say, or some of the things that we experience, because it's not within their realm of experience. So you don't even imagine it in your wildest dreams that type of thing would happen. So I think being able to have that empathy and being able to go, actually, you know what, that may never have happened to me, but I can understand how that would impact on you and how it would affect your behaviours and your self-esteem and your career prospects and et cetera, is a really important part of that inclusion.
And how do you think people can develop awareness around inclusion? Because you're right, it is such a valuable part of empathy. So somebody can think they're very empathetic, but without really understanding the inclusion element, how can that continue to improve? Where do you think they can get a better understanding of that?
It's a combination of things. So one of the things that a lot of people do is they come and they ask, and that's fine, but it's also irritating as hell and really exhausting. So there's something about doing a bit of your own work. So, listen to the podcast, read books, watch films, watch documentaries, all that type of thing. But then check your understanding of it with people and kind of go, don't assume that because that's what you've seen, that's the same for everybody. My experience of being Black is very different to a lot of people's, because I'm mixed heritage for a start. I've got a white mum, grew up in the north of England, born here, slightly Geordie accent, all that type of thing. My experience is very, very different. And therefore, you can't just transfer an experience of somebody who is first generation, living in inner city, London or Birmingham, to what I would have experienced. So there's something about just having that, I've heard this, I'm interested, and I'm doing it from a point of genuinely wanting to learn and grow. And I think it's really important that you structure any conversations in that I'm here because I want to learn and grow and check my understanding because I want to be more supportive of you.
What role do you think lived experience plays in developing an empathetic culture?
I think I was just thinking about when you were talking, it's about expanding your bubble, isn't it? So that you become aware of your own privilege that we all have and all those unconscious kind of biases that we're carrying, but also that you can take on more of those different perspectives from lived experiences, because like you say, just because somebody has the same protected characteristic doesn't mean everything about them's the same. They're all still individual people as well with different lives and experiences. So I think from what we've done with the Percy Headley Foundation is probably taught us a lot about trying to take on as many perspectives as possible to get the kind of richest possible outcome, but also having like an open mind, and that we'd never ever say that we're the experts of accessible communications or we're the experts in this particular area, that it's always just about being open to learning and not being too sensitive about getting it wrong, which I think is quite difficult, but that can create such a barrier, because if you're too scared to to try and to learn and to speak with people and to build those relationships, you're never going to move forward.
I would hope actually that if you have lived experience of anything, it should make you more open to understanding other people's experiences of different things. It doesn't always work that way, unfortunately, but there's something about, actually, I can understand that my experience is different from the norm. And I think this is one of the things I quite often say to women, is that some of the experiences that I have as a Black person are similar to experiences that I have as a woman in terms of, is that place safe for me to go to? All of that type of thing. It's just there's another layer on top of it. And I think sometimes it makes it easier for us to understand some other people's experiences because we have experienced that. It doesn't always work, and that some people become very kind of siloed, and it's that they're not willing to see other perspectives. That's more about them and their unwillingness to have empathy. But I think it can be really valuable, not just for the subject that you're talking about, but about how you can then absorb and learn more. Your point, though, about not being afraid to get it wrong and apologizing when you get it wrong, I think is really important. If you get it wrong, somebody corrects you, don't get defensive about it. You go, I'm really sorry, I didn't know that. Thanks for correcting me. I'm going to try my best not to do it again. Most people are absolutely fine with that.
That's it. The world's not going to end, is it? And I think it's just not getting caught up, I suppose, and worrying about saying the wrong thing, like we were talking about with bereavement before. That if you just create the silence, then that can create its own issues and problems. So, I think if everyone's coming to good intentions and doing all of the possible work that they can do, we'll only move forwards with a few bumps in the road, maybe. But,
Yeah. How do you think organisations can create that caring, supportive culture in advance rather than when life happens?
From my perspective, I think it's a few things. I think it's about, as I said earlier, about just asking those questions about people, kind of checking in with people. How are you doing? And not just we all do it. Hiya, how are you? Great, off you go. But actually, how are you actually doing? How are you feeling? What are you worried about? That having some of those questions so that people know that's a normal conversation to have. I try to, and this can be really difficult. It's a difficult balance, but I try to also share what I'm experiencing and what I'm feeling, because that almost gives people permission to do the same. For some people, that can be really new and really scary coming from the boss. And I think some people don't know what to make of it, and sometimes actually probably question my authenticity in that. But it's like, I'm just doing it because actually it feels right for me to talk about some of this stuff. And I hope that in me talking about it, it makes it easier for you to talk about it.
I think that's really valuable, especially if there's preconceptions from the employee around worried about oversharing or how that might look as an employee. So I think that's really helpful, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, you can't sit there as a leader and be an absolute gibbering wreck and go, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. That's not the way to instill confidence in your team. But there's something about going, what? Actually, this is really troubling. And when we had the riots last year, saying things like, this is a really scary time for lots of us, and just take care of each other and check in on each other. That type of thing is really important.
Yeah,
definitely. I think it's creating that vulnerability so that people know that they can kind of trust you and come to you is really important. It's quite a practical thing as well, but I think it's the way that we communicate with each other about like the workloads that we're carrying as well, which is coming at it from quite a practical perspective. But I think that's what your team are kind of like looking to you for as an employer, often is to like help them with the practical aspects, because the issues that they're facing outside of work, we can't really do much to help with those. But what we can do is hopefully make work something that they just don't have to worry about for a period of time. So the way we kind of communicate and share like resource across the business is already quite structured to allow for different projects kind of dropping in and out. And I think being used to having those open conversations about workload and deadlines, I think really helps to make those quite practical, non-emotive conversations that then nobody's going to get judged because they say they're busy or they're quiet. That's okay. We'll just all work together and kind of get everything done that needs doing and support each other.
Yeah, that's great. And then when you spoke about flexibility as well, how can leaders make that feel fair to other employees in the organisation who might not be 100% sure what is going on with that individual?
Yeah, I think that's hard. And I guess it must be more difficult for your organisation because of the nature of what you do, because our organisation, most people can work from home most of the time. So that makes it a little bit easier, I suppose, to have that like equity, because pretty much everybody accesses the flexibility in some way, shape or form. So we have core office hours of 10 to 4, and outside of that people can top and tail their day as they wish, and we have hybrid working as well, and I think there's also something to be said for leading by example. And if you've got to go and pick the kids up early, tell everybody that's what you're doing. Don't just scuttle off, because it just sets that example that that's fine, that you've got a life outside of work and nobody's going to get kind of penalised for that.
Yeah, and I think that it is that thing of really trying to focus on outcomes a lot. So actually, if you're like an absolute whiz and you have massive focus 2 hours of work and you get done what most people would do in 4 hours, great. I really don't care as long as the work's done. I don't mind so much if you choose, because it suits your life, to do that work at 8 o'clock at night, as long as that's not something you have to do because the workload's too high. It is harder when we've got things like the wards and the shops where they have to be staffed at certain times, but we try to be really accommodating with staff when they're going through short periods of other commitments, instability and things like that, about trying to be as flexible as possible, allowing some flexi time and that type of thing. But actually, we allow staff to reduce and then increase hours if they need to. So somebody can say, actually, for the next 3 months, I need to drop 3 hours a week. Now, yeah, they're reducing their pay, which may not be ideal, but it means that they've got that kind of guarantee that they can do that, and that's fine, and that we work around that as best we can. And that's something that I think not everybody gets that that ability to go, I need to reduce my hours, or I'm in a position now where I can go back up to the hours that I was contracted for. So that type of thing is really important.
I think there's a real kind of business benefit to it as well, to being more empathetic and flexible. It might cause you a few more headaches in the short term, but if you have higher, team retention, it's better for business. It's more like commercially viable as well.
So you've probably already answered this, but just in case there's something extra you want to add, how do you balance being a compassionate leader whilst also meeting the demands of a complex organisation?
So I would say people need to understand that being compassionate is not the same as being a walkover. And I think sometimes people think they are. They think that we're just kind of all woolly jumper wearing, tofu eating, whatever you want to call it. Being compassionate and having a compassionate approach to things is core to driving the business forward. As Jen said there, actually retention is better. For us, if we lose our retail staff, we have to shut shops temporarily. That is a real concern for us. That helps us do what we do. Same with, we can't take care of patients if we don't have the right numbers of staff. So being very clear on what the objectives are, but also seeing it not as as being a core part of what we do. Being compassionate is a way in which we deliver those techniques, or those outcomes rather than being, well, what we really are is hardcore business people who drive for results. And sometimes we're a bit nice. It's part of what we do.
And it's kind of like baked into the way that you operate, because I think there's more of a like that hardcore business. It's more of a traditional idea of leadership, which I hope we're kind of moving away from slowly sometimes. But if you have that kind of compassionate, empathetic approach, sort of baked in from the start to everything that you do, it doesn't become a choice of do we do the nice thing or the thing that's going to make money. I think you can do both, because if you look after your people and your people are happy, they'll stay with you, they'll do really good work, they'll communicate well with our clients. So I actually think it's a good way to run your business.
And for both of you, what's one thing that you would recommend a leader does this week to help promote empathy across the organisation?
Starting maybe with some sort of self-awareness, because I feel as I don't want to say I'm the expert on empathy because I make mistakes, but I think maybe being empathetic to yourself, and actually that's okay to make some mistakes and to get things wrong sometimes, as long as you kind of have the awareness to acknowledge that and to fix it and to move forward. And I think having that network of people around you who you can bounce ideas off and who you have that kind of trust and sort of openness with, so you can sense check and get some different perspectives on team issues or difficulties, so you can kind of constantly try to improve, because none of us are perfect, but it's it's just what we kind of aspire to, I suppose.
Yeah, great.
And I think for me, I would say to have some proper conversations. Just to give a little story, years ago, my boss was sitting having a one-to-one, and he started with, "How are you?" And I proceeded to tell him how my life was. And I just met somebody new, started dating and things. And I finished. He said, "That's really good, Steph, but I was interested in how work is." Didn't want to know about anything. I was a single mom at the time, so I had a lot going on. Maybe it's about having a couple of those conversations. So when you say to somebody, "How are you?" you're actually asking how they are. And if they go, "I'm fine," say, "Are you really fine?" Because actually that can be enough just to stop somebody, and they'll go, I used to know somebody when you used to pass them in hospital corridors, and I say, "How are you?" And he'd say, "I'm absolutely blooming marvellous, thank you very much." And it would make me go, "Oh, actually, I'm feeling quite good today as well," instead of fine. So yeah, have some real conversations with people. You don't need to tear their lives apart and dig down deep, but just a genuine conversation about people and how they are.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it's almost like a habit, isn't it? So it's almost like when you say hello, it's "How are you?" "I'm good." "How are you?" "Good." And then you move on.
Yeah.
It's just part of behaviour. And how many times do you do that in a day?
That's it. Sometimes if it's a physical thing, you haven't even stopped. You're saying it as you're walking past people.
That's it. Yeah, it's very like baked into like British culture, I think, isn't it? Just to use it as just more of a greeting rather than an actual stopping to take the time and have a real conversation.
And just finally, what's one thing that you'd like our listeners to take away from the conversation today?
I think for me, it's that towards the end, that thing of compassion isn't being soft. Compassion is about being human, and it's actually really beneficial. So if you want to think in hardcore business terms, it's a really sensible thing to do, to be a compassionate leader, but actually it makes you happier as a leader, because you're living more of your life and giving to yourself as well as to others.
Yeah, it helps to build that kind of resilience of yourself and your team, doesn't it, to be able to like keep going when times are tough. So yeah, I think that's really important. And I suppose just to add in, to challenge the perspectives, like who's feeding into your narrative of what work should be, and to try to like expand that. And that's something like myself included, we could all like do more of. You couldn't do enough of that. And I think the more you do it, the greater levels of kind of empathy and understanding that you'd have in your work.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you both for joining me. It's been a great episode. Very insightful.
Thank you.
Thank you.